In the bustling city of Lagos, Nigeria, where the honking of cars competed with the persistent chatter of street vendors, lived a man named Tony Okafor. At just 31, he had built a telecommunication empire that was the envy of many. His success in the corporate world was unmatched, but in matters of the heart, Tony found himself at a crossroads. Tony's office, a sleek skyscraper that stood out in Victoria Island, was a testament to his achievements. One sunny afternoon, he sat behind his mahogany desk, frowning at his computer screen, when his assistant, John, knocked on the door. "Come in," Tony called, not looking up. John entered, a stack of files in his arms. "Sir, the quarterly reports are ready for your review." Tony waved his hand dismissively. "Just leave them on the desk, John. I'll look at them later." John hesitated, then asked, "Is everything all right, sir? You seem distracted." Tony leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his well-groomed hair. "John, let me ask you something. You are married, right?" "Yes, sir. 3 years now," John said. A smile spread across his face. "How did you know she was the one?" "Well, sir, I just knew. When you find the right one, you will know." "That's what everyone says. But how can you be sure? How can you know you found the perfect woman?" "I don't think there's such a thing as a perfect woman, sir. Or a perfect man for that matter." Tony leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Nonsense. There must be, and I'm going to find her." John opened his mouth to respond, then thought better of it. "Will that be all, sir?" Tony nodded, already lost in thoughts. As John left the office, Tony pulled out his phone and opened his dating app. He had a mission, and he was determined to succeed. Over the next few months, Tony went on a dating spree that would have even put the most enthusiastic bachelor to shame. He met women from all walks of life, each one carefully selected based on a stringent set of criteria he had developed. There was Amaka, the high-powered lawyer who could argue circles around him but couldn't cook to save her life. Their date ended on the day she invited Tony to her house, and in trying to impress him with her culinary skills, her kitchen caught fire. It took the intervention of neighbors to put out the fire, but after that, Tony ran for his dear life, ending the relationship that was yet to kick off. Then came Blessing, the international model with looks that could stop traffic. Unfortunately, her conversation was limited to discussing her latest photo shoot and complaining about the lack of vegetarian food options in Lagos restaurants. Folake, the brilliant neurosurgeon, seemed promising until Tony realized she was married to her job and viewed him as nothing more than an interesting specimen to study. Each date left Tony more frustrated than the last. He began to wonder if his perfect woman existed at all. This cycle kept repeating itself, but Tony was sure that one day he would find the woman of his dreams and settle down for good. No matter how long it took, he was going to keep searching. But Tony's mother, Nkechi, was not as patient as Tony. As a typical African mother she was, she started pestering Tony to settle down while he was in his late 20s. Each time she paid Tony a visit, she would not let him rest. Now at 31, and seeing that his son was yet to introduce a bride to her, Nkechi packed some of her clothes and that of her husband, Emeka, locked up her shop, and together they left for Tony's house in the city. She didn't want to inform Tony of their coming because he would have come up with an excuse to discourage them from coming. The reason Tony always tries to discourage them was because he knew that 70% of the time his mother would spend with him, she would be pestering him about the need to settle down. On reaching the city, Nkechi picked up her phone and called her son. "Honey, My son, the pride of his mother. Your father and I are at the park. Our bus just arrived now. Please, can you come and pick us up? The sun is too much. Mama, why didn't you people inform me before boarding a bus? What if I wasn't in town? What would you have done? We knew you would be around, so why bother you with such information? Please, the sun is too high. Come and pick us up before you will see your parents on television as missing persons, his mother said. Ha, this woman. I don't know what to do with you. Just wait there, oh. I'll be right there in a few minutes, please. Tony said as he left his office, got into his car, and made his way to the park. Tony and his parents have a beautiful relationship. Being their only son, his parents did everything in their power to train him until he finished university, landed a job with a telecommunication company before setting up his own. He knew how they never enjoyed life because they were solely focused on giving him the best that they could afford. Therefore, as annoying as his mother in particular could be, Tony knew he could never joke with his parents. Immediately they got home from the park, the mother did not waste time to embark on her reason for coming. Tony, Nnam, see how everywhere is looking very dirty and dusty. I'm sure if you were married, this house would not look so dusty. Mama, my cleaner cleans and dusts this house every day. I know what you are driving at, but I will not fall for it, Tony said. Well, I can still see small dust here and there, Tony's mother said, while trying to clean what was already clean. By the way, what do you have in this big house of yours? I don't want you to take I and your father to all those restaurants that serve uncooked food and charge plenty money. Money that your wife would have used in making a good pot of soup for you that will last. Anyway, I'm here now, and even if I'm just here for a day, I'll make your favorite meals and stock them in the refrigerator for you. But right now, the worms in my stomach are fighting the Third World War, and I'm sure your father is about to faint from hunger, his mother said. Speak for yourself, woman. Hunger cannot make a grown man like me faint. But I must admit, I am really famished. This is why I don't like all these long journeys. Hunger nearly ate up my intestines on our way coming, even when I made sure I loaded myself with the delicious fufu and okra soup your mother prepared for me, his father, Emeka, said. That's why you people should have informed me of your coming before boarding a bus. But don't worry, after complaining about how the restaurant food was not good for me the last time you came, I went out of my way to get a cook. Joshua, please come, he called out to his cook. These are my parents. Mama, Papa, you are welcome, the cook replied. Thank you, my son, they both responded. Joshua, ask my parents what they want to eat and make sure you make it to their taste. And please be fast about it, Tony added. After they had all eaten and rested well, Nkechi left the room where she was with her husband and went looking for her son to discuss the matter that brought them to the city. She found him in the living room going through his phone. Tony, Agonia, you're not looking any different from the last time I was at your house. With all the money you have, and even now that you have a cook, you are still not looking well cared for. My son, what is bothering you? You know you can confide in me, your mother, she said. Mama, Tony began. Forget it. It's nothing. Nkechi went closer to sit by him, her keen eyes studying his face. My son, please tell me, is it work? Are those other big telecommunication companies troubling you again? No, Mama. Work is fine. It's just... He hesitated, then blurted out. I can't find a wife. Nkechi's eyebrows shot up. Eh? Onya kiji wanyeku, she said, meaning, is that what you are saying so lightly? How did you know that is why we are here? But wait, What do you mean you can't find a wife? Are there no more women in Lagos? There are plenty of women, Mama, but none of them is right. I want someone perfect. Perfect? No wonder you can't find anyone. There is no such thing as a perfect person, my son. But Mama, Tony protested, I'm successful. I have money. I need a woman that is tall, slim, beautiful, smart, well-read, and humble. I should be able to find such a woman, but I haven't been able to. When I meet the ones that are beautiful, I get to discover that they have nothing upstairs. And when I find the ones that are brilliant, they are hardly someone I will be proud to showcase as my wife. It is getting so frustrating. You should have added that you want someone that is handsome too, since you want all the qualities in one person. Nkechi shook her head, a mix of amusement and exasperation on her face. Anthony, marriage is not like buying a new car. You can't just pick the one with the best features. Tony's father, Emeka, walked in at that moment, catching the tail end of the conversation. What's this I hear about buying a car? Nkechi turned to her husband. Your son thinks he can shop for a wife like he's at a marketplace. Emeka burst into laughter. Is that so? Then tell me, Tony, what kind of wife are you looking for? One with a warranty? Maybe a money-back guarantee. Tony's cold. This isn't funny, Papa. I'm serious. I want to get married, but I can't find the right woman. Emeka sobered up, though his eyes still twinkled with amusement. Son, when I met your mother, she was far from perfect. She talked too much. She couldn't cook fufu to save her life, and she had a temper that could scare a lion. Nkechi slapped her husband's arm. Emeka, I could cook fufu then, just that it wasn't as strong as Zuma Rock like you always want. But I learned to make it perfectly, didn't I? Emeka caught his wife's hand, bringing it to his lips for a kiss. Yes, you have, my love, and you are perfect for me. And over the years, we have grown together. That's what marriage is about. Tony watched his parents, a mix of emotions swelling in his chest. Part of him longed for what they had, but another part still clung to his idea of perfection. Nkechi turned back to Tony, her expression softening. My son, let me tell you something. There's a girl in our village, Tina. She's smart, hardworking, and comes from a good family. Why don't you meet her? Tony's eyes widened in horror. A village girl? Mama, please. I'm a successful businessman. What would I do with a village girl? Anthony Chukwuemeka Okafor, are you now too good for your roots? Have you forgotten where you came from? Nkechi's eyes narrowed dangerously. No, Mama. That's not what I meant. It's just, times have changed. I need someone who can understand my world, my kind of business. I need someone sophisticated, not some village girl. And you think a village girl can't understand your world? His father cut in, his voice stern. You'd be surprised, my son. Some of the smartest people I know never set foot in a university. Tony looked between his parents, realizing he was fighting a losing battle. Fine, he sighed. I'll meet her, but I'm not making any promises. Nkechi beamed, clapping her hands together. Wonderful. I will arrange everything. You will see, Anthony. Sometimes, the perfect thing is not what you expect. And since our mission has been achieved, we shall be leaving next tomorrow. I cannot keep my shop locked up for a long time. As his parents left him to retire for the night, Tony knew he had just been expertly maneuvered into something he would regret. But the thought of disappointing his mother was even worse than the prospect of meeting this village girl. He just hoped his mother wouldn't expect him to start farming or something equally ridiculous. The following weekend, Tony found himself reluctantly driving down the dusty road to his ancestral village. He had swapped his designer suit for a more casual outfit, but he still felt out of place as he drove through the familiar landscape of his childhood. As he pulled up to his parents' village home, he saw his mother waiting for him on the veranda, a wild smile on her face. Beside her stood a young woman, and Tony's heart sank. This must be Tina. He stepped out of the car, plastering a polite smile on his face. As he approached, he could see Tina more clearly. She was pretty, he had to admit, with smooth, dark skin and expressive eyes. But she was dressed simply in a colorful wrapper and blouse, her hair tied back with a scarf. Not exactly the sophisticated city woman he had envisioned as his wife. "Tony," his mother called out, "come and meet Tina." Tony stilled himself and walked up to them. "Hello, Mama. Hello, Tina. It's nice to meet you." Tina looked him up and down, one eyebrow raised. "So, you are the famous Tony. I was expecting someone taller." Tony blinked, taken aback. This was not the meek village girl he had anticipated. What?" Nkechi laughed nervously. "Tina, be nice. Tony is a very successful businessman in Lagos." Tina shrugged. "That's nice. I'm a very successful farmer here. I suppose we all have our talents." Tony's mouth fell open. Was she mocking him? He turned to his mother, who was looking between them with a mix of hope and trepidation. "Mama," he said through clenched teeth, "can I speak with you for a moment, privately?" Nkechi nodded, leading him into the house. As soon as they were out of earshot, Tony exploded. "Mama, what were you thinking? She's smart, confident, beautiful," Nkechi supplied. "She's rude," Tony finished, "and completely unsuitable. I can't marry a farmer, Mama. What would my business associates say?" "Anthony, you listen to me. Tina is not just a farmer. She runs the most successful agricultural cooperative in this region. She has educated people on sustainable farming practices and helped triple the village's crop yield. Just because she didn't go to the university doesn't mean she's not intelligent or capable. Mama, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but this isn't going to work. We are from different worlds." "Different worlds? You grew up in this village, Anthony. Or have you forgotten that in your rush to become a city man?" "Of course not, Mama. But things are different now. I have a certain lifestyle, certain expectations. All I'm asking for is that you spend the day with her. If you still feel the same way tomorrow, I won't say another word about it." "Fine, one day, just one day." They returned to the veranda where Tina was examining Tony's car with interest. "Nice ride," she said as they approached. "I bet it guzzles fuel like a drunk at a palm wine festival." "It's a hybrid, actually. Very fuel efficient," he said, almost exasperated. "Of course it is. Well, city boy, are you ready to see how we live in the village? Are you afraid you might get your designer shoes dirty?" "I'm not afraid of a little dirt." "Good, because we are going to the farm. Hope you are not allergic to honest work." As they set off down a narrow path, Tony trailing behind Tina, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was in for a very long day. The sun beat down mercilessly as Tony walked behind Tina, sweat soaking through his designer shirt. They had been walking for what felt like hours, though his watch told him it had only been 20 minutes. "Are we there yet? And what is it with all these flies?" he panted, swiping at a particular persistent fly. Tina glanced back at him, amusement dancing in her eyes. "What's wrong, Tony? Can't you keep up with a village girl?" "Of course I can. I just don't see why we couldn't have driven and miss out on all this quality time together. Besides, The road doesn't go all the way to the farm. You city people are too dependent on your machines. As they went down a small hill, a vast expanse of lush greenery came into view. Neat rows of crops stretched as far as the eye could see, spread with fruits, trees heavy with ripe mangoes and oranges. Despite himself, Tony was impressed. "This is all yours?" Tina nodded, pride evident in her face. "Mine and the cooperatives. We've worked hard to make this land productive." She led him down the hill, pointing out different crops and explaining their cultivation methods. Tony found himself genuinely interested, asking questions about yield rates and pest control. As they reached a small shade at the edge of the field, Tina turned to him with a mischievous glint in her eye. "Ready to get your hands dirty, city boy?" Before Tony could protest, she thrust a hoe into his hands. "We need to weed this section. You think you can handle it?" Tony looked at the tool in his hands as if it might bite him. I've never done this before." The great Tony Okafor, admitting there's something he can't do? I'm shocked. Stung by her teasing, Tony gripped the hoe tighter. "I didn't say I couldn't do it, just that I haven't done it before. How hard can it be? Why don't you show me?" Determined to prove himself, he attacked the nearest weed with everything in him. The hoe bounced off the hard-packed earth, nearly flying out of his hands. He stumbled, barely keeping his balance. Tina's laughter rang out behind him. "Careful there, Tony. The goal is to remove the weeds, not perform a war dance." "Very funny. Why don't you show me how it's done, since you are such an expert?" "Gladly," Tina said, taking the hoe from him. With smooth, practiced movements, she began clearing the weeds, making it look effortless. Tony watched her work, grudgingly impressed. "All right, I get it. You are good at this." "It's not about being good, Tony. It's about understanding the land, working with it instead of against it. Here, let me show you." She handed the hoe back to him, then stood behind him, placing her hands over his. "Relax," Tina said softly. "You are too stiff. Move with the tool, like this." She guided his hands, showing him how to angle the hoe and use his body weight effectively. Tony found himself hyper-aware of her presence, the scent of earth and something distinctly floral enveloping him. After a few minutes, Tina stepped back. "There, you've got it. Now let's see you do it on your own." Tony took a deep breath and began walking, mimicking the movements Tina had shown him. To his surprise, he found a rhythm, the repetitive motion almost meditative. They walked side by side for the next hour, Tony stealing glances at Tina when he thought she wasn't looking. He had to admit, there was something captivating about the way she moved, confident and at ease in her environment. As the sun reached its highest point, Tina called for a break. "Let's rest for a bit. There's shade by that mango tree." They settled beneath the mango tree. Tina then reached up, plucking a ripe mango from a low hanging branch. "Here," she said, offering it to Tony. "You've earned it." "Thank you. Is there somewhere I can wash it?" he asked. "Wash it? There's a particular taste an unwashed freshly plucked mango has. Go on, take a bite," Tina said, urging him on. Tony took the fruit and bit into the mango, juice dribbling down his chin. The sweetness exploded on his tongue, more intense than any mango he had ever tasted in the city. "This is amazing," he said between bites. "Nothing beats fruit straight from the tree. Your fancy supermarkets can't compare." As they sat in silence, Tony found himself reassessing his initial impressions of Tina. Yes, she was sharp-tongued and quick to tease, but there was also a depth to her he hadn't expected. "So," he said, breaking the silence, "tell me more about this cooperative of yours. How did it start?" Tina's eyes lit up as she began to explain, her passion evident in every word. Tony listened, fascinated by the complexity of the operation and the innovation solutions they had developed to local challenges. As Tina spoke, Tony couldn't help but draw parallels to his own business experiences. He found himself offering suggestions, bouncing ideas back and forth with her. Before they knew it, the sun was beginning to go down. Tina stood, brushing dirt from her clothes. "We should head back. Your mother will be wondering where we are." As they walked back to the village, Tony felt a strange reluctance to see the day end. He glanced at Tina, noting how the setting sun cast a golden glow on her skin. "You know," he said, "you are not what I expected." Tina raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and what did you expect? A simpering village girl in awe of the big city man?" "Something like that, I suppose." "I'm glad I was wrong," Tony said, looking embarrassed. Tina's expression softened. "You are not what I expected either. I thought you'd be all ego and no substance, but you are not terrible." "High praise indeed. I'll take it," Tony laughed. As they approached the village, Tony felt a mix of emotions he couldn't quite name. One thing was certain, this day had not gone at all as he had anticipated. When they arrived back at his parents' house, Nkechi was waiting anxiously on the veranda, her eyes widening as she saw her son looking very dirty. "Anthony, what happened to you? You look like you have been wrestling with the earth itself." "Something like that, Mama." Tina showed me around her farm. Nkechi's gaze darted between them, a hopeful light in her eyes. "And how was it?" Before Tony could respond, Tina interjected, "Oh, he did all right for a city boy. He didn't faint for once." Tony Mock glared at her. "I'll have you know I have excellent stamina. It's not my fault your idea of a casual stroll is a marathon through jungle terrain." Tina laughed. "Well, if you are so fit, maybe you would like to come back tomorrow. There's still plenty of weeding to be done." Tony found himself nodding before he could think better of it. "Sure, why not? Someone has to make sure you are doing it right." Nkechi clapped her hands together, barely containing her excitement. "Wonderful! Tina, why don't you join us for dinner? I've made ofe nsala." As they settled around the dinner table, Tony couldn't help but notice how naturally Tina fit into the scene. She bantered easily with his father and complimented his mother's cooking with genuine enthusiasm. Throughout the meal, Tony found his gaze continually drawn to Tina. He noticed things he had overlooked earlier. The intelligence sparkling in her eyes, the graceful way she gestured when she spoke, the dimple that appeared in her left cheek when she smiled. As the evening wore on, Tony realized with a start that he was beginning to enjoy himself. More than that, he was intrigued. Tina challenged him in ways he hadn't experienced before, and he found himself wanting to know more about her. When it was time for Tina to leave, Tony surprised everyone, including himself, by offering to walk her home. As they strolled through the quiet village streets, a comfortable silence fell between them. Finally, Tony spoke. "I had a good time today. Thank you for showing me around." Tina glanced at him, a smile playing at her lips. "Even though you got your designer clothes dirty?" "Even though, maybe especially because of that. It's been a long time since I did something so real." As they reached her house, Tina studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right then, good night, Tony. Try not to oversleep tomorrow. We start at dawn." As Tony watched Tina disappear into the night, he felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. He couldn't remember the last time he had looked forward to waking up at dawn, but here he was, already planning what to wear for a day of farm work. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Tony found himself settling into a routine he never thought he would enjoy. Waking up with the roosters, walking alongside Tina in the fields, and spending evenings talking about everything from agricultural economics to their favorite childhood memories. With each passing day, he felt the walls he built around his heart slowly crumbling. On the 5th day of his visit, as they sat under their now favorite mango tree, Tina turned to him with a serious expression. "Tony, can I ask you something?" "Of course," he replied, curious about her sudden change in character. "Why are you really here? I mean, I know your mother set this up, but you could have left after the first day. Why did you stay?" Tony was silent for a moment, considering his answer. "Honestly, I'm not sure. At first, I stayed because I didn't want to disappoint my mother. But now, I'm here because I want to be, because I enjoy spending time with you." Tina's face softened into a smile. "I enjoy spending time with you too, city boy. But what happens when you go back to Lagos? Will you forget all about the village girl who taught you how to hold a hoe?" Tony reached out and took her hand, surprising them both. "I don't think I could forget you if I tried, Tina." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Then, breaking the tension, Tina smirked and said, "Good, because I expect regular progress reports on your farming skills. Can't have you forgetting everything I taught you." They both laughed, but there was an undercurrent of something more, a promise of possibilities neither had expected when they first met. As Tony's visit drew to a close, he found himself torn. He had responsibilities in Lagos, a life he had built for himself, but the thought of leaving Tina behind made his heart ache in a way he had never experienced before. On his last night in the village, Tony made a decision. He asked Tina to come visit him in Lagos, to see his world as he had seen hers. To his delight, she agreed. 2 weeks later, Tony was waiting nervously at the Lagos park, scanning the buses for Tina's familiar face. When he finally spotted her, his heart skipped a beat. She looked different in her city clothes, a simple but elegant dress that hugged her curves, but her eyes still sparkled with the same mischief he had grown to love. "Well, well," Tina said as she approached him, eyeing his suit. "Look who cleaned up nicely. I almost didn't recognize you without the layer of dirt." Tony laughed, pulling her into a hug. "I missed you too, Tina." As they drove through the bustling streets of Lagos, Tony pointed out landmarks and shared stories about his life in the city. Tina listened with interest, asking insightful questions that reminded Tony of her sharp intellect. That evening, Tony had arranged a dinner with his closest friends. He was excited to introduce Tina to them, sure they would be as charmed by her as he was. The restaurant was upscale, all sleek lines and ambient lighting. Tony's friends were already seated when they arrived. Michael, a fellow businessman, Adebayo, a lawyer, and Ruby, who ran a successful tech startup. "Everyone, this is Tina," Tony said, unable to keep the pride out of his voice. Tina smiled warmly. "It's nice to meet you all. Tony has told me so much about you." As they settled into their seats, Michael leaned forward. "So, Tina, Tony tells us you are from his village. What do you do there?" "I'm a farmer," Tina replied confidently. "I run an agricultural cooperative." There was a moment of awkward silence. Tony could see the surprise and skepticism on his friends' faces. Adebayo cleared his throat. "A farmer? How quaint. And how did you and Tony meet?" Tina, sensing the shift in atmosphere, straightened her spine. Tony's mother introduced us. She thought he could use some grounding. Ruby laughed, but it wasn't entirely kind. Oh, I'm sure Tony found that very grounding indeed. Tell me, Tina, have you ever been to Lagos before? No, this is my first time, Tina admitted. Ah, I see. Well, it must be quite overwhelming for you, so different from the village life you are used to. Tony frowned, noticing the condescending tone in Ruby's voice. He opened his mouth to say something, but Tina beat him to it. It is different, Tina agreed, but you'd be surprised how much modern farming has in common with running a business in the city. We deal with multiple supply chains, market fluctuations, and technological innovations just like any other industry. Michael raised an eyebrow. Really? I wouldn't have thought farming was so complex. Tina launched into an explanation of the cooperative's operations, touching on everything from sustainable farming practices to their use of data analytics to optimize crop yields. Tony watched with pride as his friend's expressions shifted from skepticism to grudging respect. As the evening wore on, however, Tony couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. His friends were polite to Tina, but there was an undercurrent of tension he couldn't ignore. After Tina excused herself to use the restroom, Adebayo leaned in close to Tony. Can we talk to you for a moment, bro? Tony nodded, following his friends to a quiet corner of the restaurant. Tony, what are you doing? Michael hissed. A farmer? Really? What's wrong with her being a farmer? Tony asked, defensive. Ruby placed a hand on his arm. Nothing's wrong with it per se, but Tony, think about your position. You are one of the youngest telecommunication CEOs. You are on track for bigger things. How does a village farmer fit into that picture? Tina's not just any farmer, Tony argued. She's intelligent. We can see that, Adebayo cut in, but be realistic. Your worlds are too different. What will your business associates think? How will she fit into your social cycle? Tony felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. He looked back at the table, where Tina was now sitting alone, her posture slightly less confident than before. Just think about it, okay? Michael said. We are saying this as your friends. We want what's best for you. As Tony rejoined Tina at the table, he felt torn. His friend's words echoed in his head, mixing with his own doubts and insecurities. The ride back to Tony's apartment was quiet, the earlier warmth between them replaced by an uncomfortable tension. Your friends seem nice, Tina said finally, her voice carefully neutral. Tony winced, knowing she had picked up on the undercurrents at the dinner. They can be a bit judgmental sometimes. I'm sorry if they made you uncomfortable. It's fine. I'm used to people underestimating me because I'm from the village. They didn't mean it. It's just, Tony trailed off, not sure how to defend his friends without dismissing Tina's feelings. When they reached his apartment, Tony tried to salvage the evening, suggesting that they watch a movie or talk about her impressions of Lagos. But Tina begged off, claiming fatigue from the journey. The next few days were strained. Tony did his best to show Tina around Lagos, but he could feel her pulling away. Their easy banter had been replaced by polite small talk, and Tony found himself second-guessing every interaction. On the third day of her visit, Tony had to go to the office for an important meeting. When he returned home, he found Tina packing her bags. What are you doing? He asked, alarmed. Tina looked up, her eyes sad but determined. I'm going back to the village, Tony. It's not going to work. What? Why? Tony felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. Because we are from different worlds. Just like your friend said, I saw how uncomfortable you were at the dinner, how you struggled to defend me. I don't want to be someone's dirty little secret or their charity project. Tina, no, that's not it. She held up her hand, cutting him off. It's okay, Tony. I get it. You have a life here, a career to think about. I won't stand in the way of that. Before Tony could formulate a response, Tina had grabbed her bags and was heading for the door. Tina, wait! Please! If you insist you want to go, at least let me take you to the park. That won't be necessary. I have already made the necessary inquiries from the kind lady selling down the street. I will find my way. Goodbye, Tony, Tina said as she opened the door and left. Tony stood in the empty apartment, feeling like he had just let something irreplaceable slip through his fingers. In the days that followed, Tony threw himself into his work with renewed vigor. Told himself he was doing the right thing, that he and Tina were too different, that it never would have worked out anyway. But in quiet moments, he found himself remembering her laugh, the feel of her hand in his, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her farm. His friends noticed the change in him. You okay, man? Adeboye asked one evening as they hung out. You've been off lately. Tony shrugged, not meeting his friend's eyes. I'm fine, just focused on work. Adeboye studied him for a moment. Is this about Tina? Look, I know what I said might have been harsh, but I was just looking out for you, bro. I know, Tony said, his voice flat. You were right. It never would have worked out. But even as he said the words, a part of him rebelled against him. He thought of Tina's strength, her intelligence, the way she had challenged him and made him see the world differently. Had he really thrown all that away because of what others might think? Weeks turned into months, and Tony's life settled into a familiar routine. He dated women his friends approved of, sophisticated city girls who knew all the right people and said all the right things. But none of them made him feel the way Tina had. He found himself growing increasingly dissatisfied. One day, as he sat in his opulent office overlooking the Lagos skyline, Tony found himself staring at a small potted plant on his desk. It was a mango sapling, grown from a seed of the very mango Tina had given him that day on the farm. He had planted it on a whim, a small piece of the world that he had left behind. As he looked at the tiny plant, struggling to grow in the artificial environment of his office, Tony felt something shift inside him. He thought of Tina, of the life and passion she had brought into his world, and suddenly, the trappings of his success felt hollow. Before he could talk himself out of it, Tony was on his feet. He cancelled his meetings for the day and headed out of the office, ignoring the startled looks from his employees. The drive to the village seemed to take forever, each mile increasing Tony's determination. He had made a terrible mistake, let fear and others' expectations cloud his judgment. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to fix. As he pulled up to Tina's farm, his heart racing, Tony saw her walking in the fields with others. She looked up at the sound of his car, her eyes widening in surprise. Tony got out, his expensive shoes sinking into the soft earth. "Tina!" he called out, his voice carrying across the field. "Can we talk?" "You've come a long way just to talk, Tony. What could you possibly have to say?" Tony took a deep breath, crossing the distance between them. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "I was a fool, Tina. I let other people's opinions and my own fears get in the way of what really matters." Tina crossed her arms, her expression guarded. "And what's that?" "You," Tony said, his voice cracking with emotions. "Us. What we had. What we could have. I threw it away because I was scared of what others might think, of how different our worlds are. But being without you has made me realize that none of that matters. Tina's stern expression softened slightly, but she didn't speak. Encouraged, Tony pressed on. I know I hurt you, and I know I don't deserve a second chance. But if you are willing, I want to try again. For real this time. No more hiding. No more caring what anyone else thinks. Tina studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. And what about your fancy city life? Your important friends? Are you really willing to give all that up? Tony shook his head. I'm not giving anything up, Tina. I'm gaining everything. You showed me a world I had forgotten, a part of myself I had lost. I don't want to choose between your world and mine. I want to build a new world with you. Pretty words, Tony, but how do I know you mean them? Tony reached into his pocket, pulling out a small object. He held it out to Tina. It was the mango sapling, carefully uprooted from its spot. I grew this from the seed of the mango you gave me that first day, he explained. It's been sitting in my office, a little piece of your world in mine. But it's not thriving there, Tina. It needs to be planted here, in real soil, where it can grow strong. He knelt down, gently placing the sapling in the earth. I'm like this plant, Tina. I thought I belonged in that artificial world, but I was just surviving, not living. It made me realize how important you are to me. You are going to have to work hard to regain my trust, Tony. And I mean really work. No more running away when things get tough. He nodded earnestly. I'm ready, Tina. Whatever it takes. A slow smile spread across Tina's face. Well, you can start by helping me finish weeding this field. Think you can remember how to use a hoe, city boy? Tony laughed, relief and joy bubbling up inside him. I might be a bit rusty, but I've got a pretty good teacher. As they walked side by side under the hot sun, Tony felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in months. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, misunderstandings, and moments of doubt. But as he glanced at Tina, her face alight with quiet determination, he knew that together they could face anything. In the months that followed, Tony and Tina worked to blend their worlds. Tony split his time between Lagos and the village, learning to balance his corporate responsibilities with his growing involvement in Tina's cooperative. He introduced sustainable technology initiatives that helped boost productivity and connect rural farmers to urban markets. Tina, on her part, embraced the challenge of understanding Tony's business world. She took courses in business administration and used her practical knowledge to offer fresh perspectives on Tony's corporate strategies. Their friends watched with a mixture of surprise and admiration as Tony and Tina built a life that bridged the gap between city and village, tradition and innovation. Their wedding was a joyous affair that blended city sophistication with village traditions. Tina wore a stunning white gown for the church ceremony, then changed into a vibrant traditional outfit for the reception. Tony surprised everyone by delivering part of his vows in the local dialect, which he had been secretly learning. As they danced at their reception, surrounded by friends and family from both their worlds, Tony leaned in to whisper in Tina's ear, "You know, I came looking for the perfect woman, but I found something much better." Tina raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and what's that?" Tony smiled, pulling her closer. "The perfectly imperfect woman for me." She laughed, the sound music to Tony's ears. "Well, you're not so bad yourself for an overgrown city boy." Tony reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. He had learned that true perfection wasn't about finding someone who met all his criteria, but about finding someone who complemented him challenged him and loved him, sharp tongue, designer shoes, and all. As he looked into Tina's eyes, sparkling with love and mischief, he knew that he had found exactly that. Their story was just beginning, and he couldn't wait to see where it would lead them next. Thank you so much for watching the story. Please like, share and subscribe to my channel, and share with me in the comment section what you think about the story. I love hearing from you. Until I come your way again soon, stay happy.